I don't know how to explain, but I'm surprisingly feeling calmer about everything that had just transpired. Perhaps he was right. I've become aware that it is truly over. I don't know if anyone will be able to hear my story of these events, but I thought I might as well try to explain. It was a cold, bitter January night, one of many in a long sequence. My friend James and I decided to go out drinking like we did every couple of months, though I never liked the loud party scene, which is all you seemingly find in our home of Kansas City, so we decided to take advantage of a place nearby, Lawrence, Kansas, which is always quiet when the university students are away on their winter break. That night, we agreed to go to my favorite bar in Lawrence, Leafy's Lounge, for some cocktails. As we cruised the 40-minute drive down the interstate towards Lawrence, visibility was low while the roads were quite icy. Thankfully, I'd traversed this path many brutal winters and gained the necessary winter-defying driving skills over the years. As we approached the turnpike just outside of Lawrence, "Damn, did you see that?" James says loudly over the rock music. I look over and see an immobile vehicle that seems to have slid off the road. Behind it, a police car had its lights engaged. "I'm guessing they're from a tropical city," I joked as we shared a laugh. We arrived at the hotel to check in, the front desk agent warmly greeting us. Once we moved our stuff into our room, we ordered our Uber and waited in the lobby. "Why do you always want to go to this lame-ass bar?" James asked, only half joking. He always preferred the wilder bars and clubs with partiers who drank until they're sick. I, on the other hand, prefer more quiet atmospheres. My social meter is not what it once was, and I find myself very anxious in most social situations. It's never something a few drinks won't fix, though. "Because," I say, "I don't want to bail you out of jail the next morning." It's funny now because, given what ended up occurring that night, I would give anything to do just that. We arrived at Leafy's and got our drinks. The bar was almost empty, like I preferred. There were 4 other patrons sitting at one end. On the TV, the Chiefs game was playing, and the other 4 were watching intently while James and I began discussing the chances of the Super Bowl. 5 minutes passed before another patron came in, a tall man in a crisp black suit and tie. He came towards the center of the bar where James and I sat before asking if the seat next to James was taken. James told him no, and he took his seat before ordering a vodka on the rocks. When James and I's conversation found a brief lull, the man asked what there is to do around the city, as he wasn't from the area. At some point, the man offered to buy us our next round of drinks. His charm was certainly wearing off on James as he gladly engaged the conversation, but there's something about the situation that made me sort of uncomfortable. Plus, I never really liked accepting anything from other people, particularly strangers. I don't know if it was ultimately my social anxiety or what, but I acted on the sudden urge to decline the man's offer, pay for our drinks quickly, and leave. "Let me guess," James said, smiling as he lit up a cigarette while we stood outside the entrance. "One guy came in, and then you decided that 5 other people were too many?" "Whatever, bro," I somewhat snapped. As James puffed what was left of his cigarette, we agreed to go just down the block to another bar called Polly's Tavern. Polly's is probably going to be empty because it doesn't have a TV to watch the game, I thought to myself, but dared not say aloud to spare myself the inevitable lecture from James. He's probably right, though, I thought. Why am I like this? On the short walk over, there were maybe 2 cars that passed through the barren street. We arrived at Polly's and this time took our seats at the end of the bar before ordering our drinks. While the bartender was preparing them, James turned and pointed out 2 other young people about our age playing pool in the corner. They, like that other man at Leafy's, were also wearing black suits with ties to match. "Must be something fancy going on around here tonight," James says. The bartender seemed to hear this as he told us that he'd seen a few different parties in suits that evening and believed there might have been a funeral going on, given the matching dark colors. Over the course of about an hour, James and I continued talking. He was getting excessively drunk while I was keeping at a slower yet accelerating pace. At some point, one of the 2 others stumbled up to the bar and ordered another bourbon. While the bartender went back to prepare the drink, he focused his attention on James and I, asking how our night had been. James, always the first to interact with others, said it's been good. The guy looks at me and asks, "Wait, don't I know you from somewhere?" At this point, I had had a few drinks myself and was feeling much more comfortable. I don't think so. What's your name? He replied, Connor, with an outstretched hand. I'm Drew, I say while taking his hand in mine. Nice to meet you. Then Connor called over his much lesser drunk friend and introduced us to him. These are some cool dudes, man, Connor slurs on. Nice to meet you. I'm Mark, the friend tells us before shaking both James and I's hands. Connor then tells me that our next round is on his tab. This time, feeling more comfortable with accepting the gesture through my boozy haze, I took his offer. For about an hour more, we continued drinking with our new friends and played a few fun games of pool together before I began feeling tired. James and Connor, at this point, have drank so heavily that they were surely at the point of blackout. After winning our final game, Mark turned to me and said, It's probably time I drive Connor and I home. Yeah, I said through a yawn. It's probably time for us to call it a night, too. Would you and James like a ride home? He asked. No, we're okay. Our hotel's just up the street. I lied. For some reason, I again didn't want to accept a favor because, out of nowhere, even in my inebriated state, I suddenly sensed a discomfort with the two we had just spent so much time laughing and playing pool with. It felt almost obscene, but I stuck with my decision to refuse, and for a split second, noticeable nonetheless, Mark seemed to lock up. I felt as though he had taken offense at my refusal, but he then smiled kindly and said, No problem. Be sure to get back safe. Mark and I paid for our separate tabs, as well as that of our heavily intoxicated friends, and walked out together. Immediately after bidding farewell, Mark and Connor began making their way across the street, and what followed was almost too quick to process. A car seemingly flying at the speed of light collided with them, sending them flipping into the air before it continued speeding out of sight. Before either James or I had even processed what had happened, Connor and Mark plummeted from the air, crashing into the pavement below with a loud, thunderous crack. We both stood temporarily frozen before I ran up to them, hastily sliding on the ice. Both were lying motionless on their backs, faces relaxed, staring blankly at the stars above, blood quickly pooling beneath their heads. I frantically pulled out my phone to dial emergency services before the screen gave me the charge battery symbol. It was dead. I then screamed at James, who was still simply staring at our new friends, perhaps out of shock, to pull out his phone. He shakily ripped his phone out of his pocket and shook his head rapidly, showing me that his phone was also dead. Fuck! I screamed as I turned and hastened towards the bar. It was at the sidewalk that I realized something odd. The lights in the bar were now turned off. James and I shared confused glances before James started pulling on the door handle. It wouldn't open.
How the hell did they just close? We were just in there!
James shouted, still slurring his words while yanking the handle to no avail.
Hey! Open up! Call the police! We need help out here!
This can't be happening, I think to myself. What is going on tonight? It is at this instant that a car slowly pulls up the street at about 50 feet away. Still panicking, I motioned my arms towards the car, which proceeded to pull over close to us. The door opened and a familiar, tall man wearing a suit walked out. That same man from Leafy's earlier in the night. Hey, is everything okay? He asked as he approached us, obviously sensing that something was amiss. What's going on? He cut himself off mid-sentence as the bloody scene met his eyes. Did you call the police? He asked calmly, yet assertively. No, my phone is dead and so is his at the bar is close about. Okay, he cut me off. I'm calling them now. He quickly pulled out his phone and asked what had happened. I start telling him about the car that was speeding before he lifts up a finger to silence me. Yes, we need emergency medical services at Dolly's Tavern immediately. 2 people were hit by a car and they're bleeding profusely. No, they're not responsive. They're lying in the street. I look over at James, who looks like he's about to vomit. I turn my attention back to the man on the phone. Yes, Dolly's Tavern. Okay, we'll stay here. He ends the call and looks at James and I. EMS is on the way. The 3 of us need to stay here, though. The police are going to want some witness reports, he said. I started to wonder why we had to go out tonight of all nights. We could have just stayed at Leafy's if I wasn't such an anxious wreck, and none of this might have happened. The medical and police units are quick to arrive. After some commotion, a medic comes and informs us that Mark and Connor were pronounced dead on the scene. James and I exchanged looks of shock and bewilderment. This is not the night we had planned. After giving our reports to the officers, I told James that it was time to go back to the hotel. He nodded slowly, blankly staring at the ground. It was obvious we were both going to be shaken for quite a while. As we began walking away, we heard the man's voice behind us. "Hey, fellas, let me take you home." We both turned around to see him walking towards us. Before either of us could say a word, he continues, "I insist. It's no trouble for me. I'm headed home too." Under normal circumstances, I probably would have refused like I always do, but these weren't normal circumstances. I was exhausted physically and emotionally, and so was James, who was also heavily intoxicated, and I didn't want to walk over a mile and a half allowing this incident to fester in my mind, which would be sure to happen as Uber isn't a possibility with a dead phone. Somewhat reluctantly, I accepted the man's offer, even though I still felt uneasy about the prospect. I need to quit being so anxious about this shit, I angrily thought to myself. He led us to his vehicle on the side of the road, James and I trailing behind. I opened the back right passenger door and helped James in. He was so drunk that his ability to walk straight was slowly leaving him. I got into the front passenger side as the man started the car before slowly making a U-turn onto the street, placing what was left of our two new friends in the rearview mirror. "I don't think I ever got your name, sir," I said. The man, offering a gentle smile, replied, "Travis. And yours?" "Drew. And this is James," I said as I turned around to see James fast asleep. "It's nice to meet you both," Travis said as he turned onto the street that led to our hotel. "I only wish it could have been under better circumstances." The next minute or so of the car ride was silent. My thoughts were full of self-loathing, assaulting me with what-if scenarios if I had been a normal human being who wasn't so scared of everybody and everything. It occupied my mind so much that I almost missed how the car had driven past the turn into the hotel's parking lot. "Oh, that was the hotel back there," I told Travis politely. "I know where I'm going," he replied coldly. In that second, fear gripped me with the strength of God. I tried to regain my composure and said, voice trembling, "I'm sorry, Travis, but that was the hotel back there." Without looking over, eyes still straight ahead, he said, "Be quiet." He slightly picked up the speed as we turned right on the way towards the turnpike. A million thoughts were screaming inside my head, sweat dripping from my every pore, my heartbeat thrashing against my throat. Where was he taking us? Why was he doing this? Who was this man? I breathed deeply, which brought my heart rate down just enough to realize that I needed to do something in that moment. I couldn't just sit frozen. What could I do? The scenarios went through my head quickly. I could jump out, but I would leave James alone in the car. I could yell to wake James up and try to get him to jump with me, but he wouldn't respond quick enough to escape, however Travis would respond. Even if we did jump out, where the hell would we go? I mean, who would save us? There's no one around. We picked up speed as we merged onto the highway towards the turnpike. And that's when I saw them, through the thick, foggy haze. Police lights off in the distance. It looked like multiple squad cars. Now was my chance. I took 2 quick breaths and grabbed the steering wheel tightly.
Hey!
Travis barked. Before he could do anything else, I slammed the wheel to the left. The car spun 2, 3, maybe 4 times before stopping in the ditch to the left of the road. It all happened so quickly I didn't immediately realize that we were in the ditch, stopped, the windshield shattered. I looked over at Travis. He was lying back in his seat, his eyes closed and body still. He appeared to be unconscious. I looked to the right and saw the police lights still glowing in the distance through the fog. I quickly unbuckled my seatbelt and pushed the car door open before getting out and opening James's door. It was when I opened that door that the stench hit me. James was covered in vomit. It must have happened while we were spinning. I quickly unbuckled his seatbelt and lightly tapped his face rapidly. "Hey, James," I said softly. "We need to go. Now. Come on." He appears startled, but allows me to help him out of the car. He leans against me as we both begin trudging towards the police lights in the distance. I keep looking behind me to make sure Travis wasn't following us. Each time I turned around, I only saw the silhouette of his immobilized vehicle, the headlights glaring through the haze. Once James and I got close enough to where I could make out silhouettes of officers walking within the area of the police lights, I began screaming,
"Officers! Come help us!
Each time I did so and drew nearer, it appeared as though they couldn't hear us.
Hey!"
I continued shouting. Still nothing, even though we were now easily within earshot. When we got to the tape, the fog was no longer thick, and I could see the entire scene when it dawned on me. This was the vehicle accident that we had passed on the way into town earlier that night. I start yelling again, mere feet from the officers, plainly within sight, but they continue ignoring me. Through my frustration and desperation, my eyes flitted between the officers and the vehicles before I saw something that left me standing motionless, breathless, and horrified. The two slumped bodies in the passenger and driver's seats belonged to James and I. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down and fall silent. I couldn't take my eyes off of the sight before me. The walls were simply closing in. "Finally," Travis's voice stated softly behind me, startling me out of my fixated state. "You see it." I quickly turned around and saw Travis standing there, offering a gentle smile.
"What the hell is going on?"
My voice thundered. "What is going on is that you never made it to Lawrence tonight. This is how far you and James had gotten." My mind was still a total mess. I didn't know what to say or think in that moment except, "What the hell are you talking about?" "You tried coming from Kansas City tonight. You slid off the road and totaled your car. You and James perished in the accident." I turned my head and peered into the windshield again as medical personnel pulled my body back from the steering wheel. I was aghast at the unforgettable sight of my stiff hands still clutching the wheel and eyes completely glazed and iced over, staring distantly at the car's ceiling. I turned back to Travis, who maintained a very soft, calm, and gentle demeanor. It was almost as if he had suddenly cared about me. Before I could say anything else, Travis continued. "When a human dies, its brain function continues until it becomes fully aware that the body is dead, sometimes ranging from minutes up to even hours after death." After pausing for a slight second to allow me a chance to process that much, he continued. "In other words, every event that had transpired after the crash tonight was entirely imagined by your brain, which has been functioning inside your otherwise lifeless body." "But wait," I said, almost in a pleading way. "I don't remember crashing. As a matter of fact, we passed this very car accident on the way into Lawrence." Still ever so calmly, Travis responded. "That's because your brain attempts to resist the reality as a survival mechanism, trying to course correct even after the event has occurred." So who in God's name are you? What are you?" I sputter, surely coming across as indignant, but his demeanor does not change. "I'm glad you asked. That's where I come in. I'm here for the purpose of closing the circuit to complete the process by bringing your awareness to the fact of your demise." I stopped for a second to let it soak in. I then quietly, but emotionally nonetheless, asked, "So, you're an angel of death?" Travis smiled softly. "You can say that." He continues, now pacing. "In this imagined world of yours, which we are both currently experiencing, there are only two things that are real: your consciousness and me." I stare at him before looking to my right, only to realize that James and the officers and medical personnel had all disappeared, leaving no trace behind them. "What about everyone else?" I challenged. "I interacted with so many people here tonight." "Figments of your imagination," he replied. "Your brain, this entire time, has been tacitly acknowledging your tragic death." He paused to allow me a chance to consider this. Then it occurred to me. the bartender who mentioned a possible funeral, the two others wearing suits dressed for it. As if Travis was reading my mind, he went on. My original plan was to meet you at Leafy's Lounge, build some trust, and then have the television at the bar play the news reporting the scene of your tragedy, where your names would be listed as the victims, before explaining to you what had happened. But then you resisted staying and left. You made it difficult for me, so I conjured up two others who would meet you at Polly's Tavern, who would build better rapport after you drank more and eased up before giving you a ride to your hotel. But they would instead be pulled over for drunk driving, and you would hear your names come across the officer's radio as victims of the tragic crash across town, causing your curiosity to lead you to the scene here yourself. Again, you resisted. I soaked it all in. Everything that happened tonight. The people I'd met, the beating myself up for being such a drag and feeling uneasy with these people. It was all my brain's attempts to resist its death. Why not just come tell me? I ask. Why go through all these steps and take me through this sick, sadistic loop? My anger's at the forefront again. Travis gave me a gentle, reassuring expression as he responded. Believe it or not, even I need to follow certain rules. Words ring hollow in this situation. The brain must become aware of it through direct personal witness. Otherwise, you would not believe the words, let alone from a man you had just met at a bar. Still didn't make sense. If you could somehow control figments of my imagination like Mark and Connor, I began, why not just control me by bringing me to the crash site directly? Because your brain also attempts to resist the reality, he responded. It's a battle between me and your brain's instinct to survive. This entire time you've been resisting my efforts fiercely. When I made you think I was kidnapping you, I knew how you would react once you saw the police lights. I was able to manipulate your survival instinct to bring you here yourself. Now, here you are. He widely gestured to the scene with his arms. Before he continued, he looked at me in such an endearing way that made me believe that he truly didn't wish me any harm, as if he was only there because it was his job. The circuit is now closed. Any minute now, you will be gone entirely, separated completely from conscious life permanently. For what it's worth, it was a pleasure getting to know you, Drew. Then, without any word or a chance for my response, Travis vanished, just like that. It wasn't even a disillusion. It was as if someone had clapped and he was gone. I stood there for what must have been several minutes, letting my mind flow freely, not attempting to hold on to any thoughts or come up with any plan forward. It was then that I'd finally fully accepted that I was coming to a permanent end very shortly. I walked over to the crashed car, now alone, with only my corpse inside. I took a seat on the hood, and to this present moment, through my retelling of these events to probably nobody, I haven't left. My surroundings have been flickering like a light switch since Travis had disappeared, the time gaps between each flicker getting shorter and shorter. Ironically, I am at peace because, finally, for once in my conscious life, I am fully aware that fear will not help me.